So she made a personal choice to just basically stop complaining about what she thought was her organization's lack of efforts. And instead what she did was she worked on her own self-efficacy in this area to stay positive for her volunteers and her volunteer staff, because she knew that she had to be this role model for her staff. She also made a plan to work with her volunteer staff and her volunteers, and it was really interesting. What she did was she created these brainstorming sessions and dialogues about what could realistically be done around recruiting and retention of volunteers from immigrant or communities of color. And she also made each staff accountable for cultural intelligence by asking them at the beginning of each of their meetings that they had to describe a cultural intelligent moment. And by doing this, what it was really great was it helped her to understand where her staff was at related to cultural intelligence in their progress. And then it also allowed her to jot down all of the challenges that her staff were having related to doing cultural intelligent work in terms of recruiting volunteers. So she started making a list of this because she would then present that to her manager. Then next, she asked volunteers, so she was tapping into her current set of volunteers to build these relationships, and she would ask them to give her like one-sentence statements or even one word about what it was like working across cultures and working with cultural intelligence, and how helpful was cultural intelligence to them. And as she would collect these, and actually she had like this little suggestion box where people could just drop things in. And each of these statements from her volunteers and then from her staff, she basically compiled that into a report. And she would use these statements deliberately and intentionally by connecting it to the mission and the vision of the organization. So she would show the her supervisor where the program basically fell short because of the lack of focus around diversity and cultural intelligence in volunteer work. And then finally, she did hire this part-time cultural liaison that she thought she wanted. And she realized that she really did need that person, but that person wasn't going to be this cultural liaison per se, that this person actually had a much bigger role within the organization. And she gave this person a lot of room to explore and make changes to her job responsibilities. And she did that because it was a new job and it was a new initiative for this position. So that made sense. But I would say that these 4 things that Kim did, she always says that these are really small steps for her, but she has found that building these relationships with diverse communities as a result of doing cultural intelligence work, that building relationships with diverse communities is not necessarily all about the external thing. It's actually about building your own internal relationship with your own organization and your own internal capacity. And she says that if her organization can be adaptable internally, then that will be reflective externally, and that there will be more movement towards people wanting to volunteer with her organization. And actually, she's been doing this for a couple of years now, and she feels like she's not there yet, but she does feel that these small steps have tremendously impacted her relationships with her personal volunteers and her organization, including her supervisor, who was somewhat supportive of her work, only because of priority in terms of funding. And it's really improved her relationship with community and really getting to know different community members. Okay, so that's how Kim used those 3 questions. And I don't think Kim even knows that I'm talking about her today, and that's not even her real name, so that's probably a good thing. But she, I bet that if she was here, she'd probably say cultural intelligence has really helped her to think through issues that she hasn't had before, or think through issues that she, in a different way that she hadn't had before. Okay. So I see that we have still a few more minutes, and we're at the Q&A piece of our webinar session here, and I'm going to take a few questions. I do have some questions here that I'm going to answer. I think that there are a few questions that came in, and I don't think we're going to get to them all because of the time. But what we will do is we will collect the questions, and we will send the responses to you, so everyone gets an answer to the responses of the questions. So one of the questions that came up is about, is there a cultural intelligence assessment that my organization or I can take? So very practical question, and I would say that there are no statistically valid or reliable tests or assessments of CI at this moment, only because there still needs to be a lot of research that has to be done. But I can tell you that there are some other assessments that are very similar to cultural intelligence that you could definitely tap into. So I'm going to give you a few of these, and then we will also, in our follow-up email to you, put this information in email so that you can access it. One of the intercultural development tools that I use is through Dr. Mitch Hammer and the IDI, which is the Intercultural Development Inventory. And he also has the Intercultural Conflict Inventory, and both are created by him and his company. And they're very useful to help you think about your own awareness of your intercultural development. And you could Google it up. It's Intercultural Development Inventory and Intercultural Conflict Inventory. There's also a very brief cultural intelligence assessment that is created by Christopher Early, who is one of the what is considered kind of thought leader of this field. And it's actually in a Harvard Business Review article, which we can send to you and post on the MAVA website. But it's a Harvard Business Review article that talks about cultural intelligence, and in that article there's a very small assessment to just quickly check your cultural intelligence. And then there are also several assessments on inclusion and cultural competency. I know that through other sessions that MAVA has had, we've been able to give a document about where those training and assessments are. And actually, now that I think about it, on the MAVA website, in the diversity link, there's a frequently asked question document that actually has a list of websites and resources that you can tap into, because I'm seeing here a lot of questions about how do we get our volunteer staff to be more culturally intelligent and culturally competent. So you can certainly go to that. And again, if you're quickly jotting these notes down, don't worry about it. We will send all this information to you in a follow-up email. The second question I have here is, how can I approach my supervisor or manager if they're not really committed to doing cultural intelligence work? And well, this is a very similar situation to our protagonist, Kim, who was in a same situation. Not that her supervisor didn't care about the work, it wasn't a priority in terms of the organization. And this is something I hear a lot because it has to do with resources, whether it's resources in terms of staff, timing, money, materials, volunteers. And what I guess I would say to you is, if you're having difficulty trying to get your supervisor or your manager to buy into diversity or inclusion or even doing cultural intelligence work, one of the things that I think is helpful, that I found to be helpful, is to, before you approach them, to articulate what value working with diverse audiences or diverse volunteers have to your organization's mission and its vision. And part of this is because I think managers and leaders, because of their position, they tend to get very involved in needing the concrete, tangible examples that would help them in their strategic plan, or have a connection back to mission, or have a connection back to the vision. So what I would say is really be able to articulate, like, I think Kim's example is fantastic because she was meeting a barrier, and rather than keep feeling down about it because her organization didn't have certain capacities as well as interest in doing this work, what she did was she really tried to connect it back to the mission and the vision of the organization. And I would say she even did it very covertly. And sometimes I think that if you're trying to do this type of work, the covert processes can be very helpful, in the sense that some people aren't exactly ready to want to hear or be in a place of doing this work, and so you have to really think about doing this step by step. So be realistic for yourself about your own goals and what you really want to approach your manager or your supervisor with. So even though you might be really, really excited, your manager could be on a completely different level of enthusiasm. So you really want to have your own plan of action and step by step how you could deliver the message. And sometimes I think it's better to deliver this message piece by piece rather than all at once. But it all depends on your situation. All right. Well, I am noticing that we have just a few more minutes left, and we do have a lot of questions, and I really want to be able to get to them, and we just won't be able to do it in this webinar. But again, we promise that we will be able to send you these questions in a follow-up email. And feel free to, if you have questions, even after this webinar, to get back in touch with us. So before we end this webinar, and before I bring Katie back, I just want to give you some final thoughts and comments about cultural intelligence work. One, that if you do cultural intelligence work and that you do it in a meaningful and intentional way, I think that you would come to realize that the differences in cultures really do help you to promote a diversity of your thinking within an organization, but also for yourself. And it does help you to be more innovative, and it helps you to take yourself out of the box. Cultural intelligence really does help you to be more alert and attentive to your challenges. And by helping you to break down the thought process that you have, you can start to break down the habitual patterns of behaviors that you have. And I always think that it's always been the role of culture to help us to let go of what we think we know or what we already know, and to really help open our eyes to really a responsibility that we all have in shaping a better society, whether we're doing volunteer work, whether we're in a leadership or management position, whether we're working in a private organization, but really doing cultural intelligence will help us to open our eyes to that responsibility we all share in working together. So I do thank you for participating in today's webinar on cultural intelligence. I have here www.cileadership.com, which is the website to obtain more information about cultural intelligence. And it's actually my personal website. I have some training and exercises. I see that there are questions that have come through about sample exercises around cultural intelligence. So you can go to that website and you can download exercises that are free to you that you can facilitate within a group setting or use for your own self that will help you to build your own cultural intelligence. And if you have any questions about cultural intelligence or how it might apply within your own organization, feel free to give me a call or email me. My phone number and email are there on the screen. I'm really here to help you and to help you learn, and I always learn when I help other people. And then one final piece is that in May, because this is really like the 36,000 foot level presentation about cultural intelligence, in May there will be several webinar sessions that dig deeper into each of the components. So remember how I said that the component of contemplation actually consists of compassion and forgiveness and confidence and self-efficacy and motivation. We're going to go into all of those little pieces, and these webinar sessions are actually very short. They're less than 30 minutes. Very brief, but they will cover, I think, a lot of information about each of those principles that we've spoken about. So at this time, I'm going to turn this back to Katie, and she's going to give you, close this up and maybe give you some more details about other presentations that Mava has.
Great. Thank you very much, Mai, and thank you to all of you for sticking with us. Again, I apologize for the audio issues, and apparently GoToWebinar is having some issues, so we will be passing on our feedback from that for sure. Again, thank you for joining us. Please make sure to check out our website at www.mavanetwork.org/diversity for more information, more resources you can use, and also feel free to check out the web recordings that are available on that page as well. There's lots of resources on that page as well as on Mai's website that is on your screen and that she mentioned. And please feel free to contact either us at MAVA or Mai with any follow-up questions.